There are moments in life that just etch themselves into your soul. Moments of such raw humiliation and betrayal. They change you forever. For me, it was the clink of 50 cents hitting the counter, tossed by my own brother, as he sneered, "Keep the change, sis." I'm Claire, I'm 28, and that morning, I just smiled. I said, "Thank you, Bradley," because that's what good little doormats do, apparently. The entire cafe watched, horrified, as my own flesh and blood publicly belittled me. But the truth is, that moment ignited something inside me, a spark that would soon become a fire. If you've ever felt completely invisible in your own family, you'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back 6 months. Grandpa Harold called me, his voice shaky, a sign he needed help but was too proud to ask. His longtime employee had just quit, leaving him alone to run Golden Mornings, our little corner cafe in Manhattan. This place used to be an empire back in the 80s, but now it was just Grandpa and his memories. He'd said, "I know you're busy with your graphic design work, but would you mind helping an old man out for just a few days?" Those few days turned into every single morning. How could I abandon the man who raised me when my parents were too busy spoiling my golden boy brother? The cafe at 42nd and Lexington was a tiny slice of nostalgia in a city constantly devouring its past. Grandpa Harold opened it in 1979. By 1985, he had 12 locations across New York. Then Grandma Ruth died, and somehow, the empire didn't matter anymore. He sold everything but this one cafe, the place they met, where he proposed, where they spent their happiest years. Every morning at 5:30, I'd unlock those glass doors, flip on the espresso machine, and transform. By afternoon, I was a confident graphic designer. But here, I was just Harold's granddaughter, the one who couldn't quite make the coffee as perfectly as Grandma Ruth but tried her best. The regulars knew me now. Mrs. Patterson, with her decaf and 2 sugars, always asked about Grandpa. Detective Morrison, with his black coffee, barely grunted a greeting but left decent tips. Then there was Bradley, my 32-year-old brother, successful corporate lawyer, owner of a shiny black SUV, and the professional orchestrator of my daily humiliation. This particular morning started like any other. I'd arrange pastries, wipe tables, and brace myself for another day of serving coffee to people who actually had their lives figured out. The bell chimed at 7:15, right on schedule. Well, Bradley announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look who's playing Waitress again." He wore his power suit like armor, all sharp angles and expensive fabric. His briefcase probably cost more than I made in 2 months. He approached the counter with that smirk I'd grown to hate, the one that said he knew exactly how to push my buttons and planned to do it for sport. "The usual?" I asked, already reaching for a medium cup. "Actually," he said, pulling out his phone and making a show of checking his schedule. "Make it a large today. Got a big client meeting." You know, the kind of thing successful people do. I poured his coffee, added cream, and set it down. "That'll be $4.50. Bradley made another show of reaching for his wallet, pulled out a 20, then switched it for a 5, then finally, exact change plus 50 cents. "There we go," he announced. "A tip that matches your skill level." The entire cafe went silent. Mrs. Patterson looked mortified. Detective Morrison actually looked up from his newspaper. Even the college kids stopped typing. And me? I smiled. I actually smiled and said, "Thank you, Bradley. Have a wonderful day." Because confronting him would mean admitting his words could hurt me. Because making a scene would embarrass Grandpa Harold. Because I'd spent 28 years learning that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. Bradley strutted out, probably feeling incredibly satisfied. The other customers slowly returned to their conversations, pretending they hadn't just witnessed a grown man humiliate his sister. I went through the motions, but something had changed. As I opened the register and steamed milk, I caught my reflection. The woman staring back looked tired, defeated, smaller than she should have been. That night, I called my best friend, Sarah. "Claire," she said, "you realize this isn't normal, right? Brothers don't treat sisters like hired help." "He's just stressed," I heard myself say, making excuses. "Big law firm, lots of pressure." "And you're not stressed?" She shot back. You're working 2 jobs, taking care of your grandfather, and getting treated like garbage by your own family. She was right, of course, but acknowledging it meant admitting that the family dynamics I'd accepted my entire life were toxic. It meant recognizing I'd been playing a role nobody asked if I wanted. As I fell asleep, I made myself a promise. Tomorrow would be different. Little did I know, tomorrow would bring changes I never could have imagined. The next morning, Grandpa Harold was moving slower than usual. I found him at 5 a.m., an hour before we opened, sitting at his favorite corner table with cold coffee and a faraway look. Grandpa, I approached carefully. Everything okay? He looked up, confused for a moment, then recognition flickered. Claire, sweetheart, just thinking about your grandmother. I sat across from him, noting how his hand shook slightly. Tell me about her. His face lit up. She made the best coffee you ever tasted. Not just because she knew the perfect water temperature, but because she put love into every cup. People came here not just for caffeine, but for that feeling of being cared for. He gestured around the cafe. This place was our dream, Claire. We were going to have the finest coffee shop chain in New York. Ruth had all these ideas. You did create that, I said softly. Look around. Mrs. Patterson comes here because it feels like home. Detective Morrison trusts you with his morning routine. You built something beautiful. We built something beautiful, he corrected. But after Ruth died, I couldn't see the point in expanding. The other locations felt hollow without her. The bell chimed. Mrs. Patterson, right on schedule. Good morning, dear ones, she called, settling into her usual window seat. As I prepared her decaf, I watched Grandpa Harold move around the familiar space, every gesture deliberate, practiced. He knew exactly where every cup, every spoon belonged. You know, he said quietly, wiping down the counter, your brother stopped by yesterday afternoon. My hand stilled on the espresso machine. Bradley was here. MHM. Seemed very interested in the business. Asked a lot of questions about profits, property values, that sort of thing. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What kind of questions? Oh, lawyer things. Insurance policies, debt, how much the building was worth. Grandpa Harold's voice was casual, but I detected something underneath. Said he was worried about my financial security in retirement. The bell chimed again. Detective Morrison entered, his usual cloud of intensity. He nodded at me, glanced at Grandpa Harold with what might have been concern. Black coffee, detective? I asked. Thanks, kid. He pulled out a crumpled dollar. Your grandfather feeling all right? He looks tired. I glanced at Grandpa Harold. Just one of those days, I think. Detective Morrison studied me. Family business can be complicated. You watch out for. Yourself, all right. The cryptic comment left me uneasy. He'd never offered personal advice before. What did he observe that I'd missed? The morning rush proceeded, but I watched Grandpa more carefully. He moved deliberately, often pausing to catch his breath. When he thought no one was looking, he'd press his hand to his chest and close his eyes briefly. Grandpa, I said during a lull, maybe you should see Dr. Patterson this week. Just a checkup. I'm fine, sweetheart. But his voice lacked conviction. Just getting old, that's all. By noon, the cafe was quiet. Grandpa Harold sat heavily. He'd barely touched his sandwich. I think I'll head home for a nap, he said. Can you handle the afternoon alone? This was unusual. He never left before closing. Of course. Take care of yourself. As he gathered his coat, he turned back. Claire, I want you to know how much it means to me that you're here. Your help, your company, the way you care about this place, it means everything. The earnestness caught me off guard. Grandpa, you know I love being here. I know, and I want you to remember that no matter what happens. He paused at the door. Your grandmother would have adored watching you work here. You have her heart for taking care of people. After he left, the cafe felt eerily quiet. I cleaned, restocked, and tried to shake the feeling that something fundamental was shifting. The conversation about Bradley's visit kept replaying. Since when did my brother care about Grandpa Harold's finances? My phone buzzed. A text from Bradley. Need to talk. Family dinner Sunday. Important family business to discuss. Family dinner. We hadn't had one of those in months. What constituted important family business in Bradley's mind? Another text. Bring Mom's lasagna recipe, the one Grandpa likes. Even in texts, Bradley made demands. But the mention of Grandpa's favorite dish made my stomach twist. What exactly was Bradley planning? The afternoon passed slowly. I serve a handful of customers, balance the register, clean the espresso machine with extra care. As closing time approached, I was reluctant to leave. This little cafe had become my refuge, where I felt competent and needed. Locking up, I stood on the sidewalk and looked back at golden mornings. The warm light made it inviting, cozy. I had no way of knowing that within a week, everything would change. But a small voice whispered that I should memorize this moment, this feeling of belonging, because nothing this good ever lasted in my family. Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt like walking into an ambush. Mom had set the table with her good china. Dad sat at the head, wearing his uncomfortable, serious conversation expression. Bradley lounged like he owned the place. "Claire, darling," Mom said, taking my lasagna. "You look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" Translation: "You look terrible, and we're going to pretend it's concern." "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with work." I settled into my usual seat across from Bradley, who was scrolling through his phone. Speaking of work, Bradley said without looking up, "How's the coffee shop thing going?" "It's going well. Grandpa Harold seems to enjoy the company." Bradley finally put down his phone and fixed me with that calculating look. "And he's paying you for this daily help, right?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. "It's not about money, Bradley. He's family. Family who owns valuable real estate in Manhattan," Bradley replied smoothly. "Property that's going to need proper management as he gets older." Dad cleared his throat. "That's actually what we wanted to discuss with you, Claire. Your grandfather's future care." Mom returned from the kitchen, serving lasagna. "We're worried about him living alone. In this business of running a cafe every day, it's too much for an 82-year-old man. He loves that cafe." I protested. "It's where he and Grandma Ruth were happiest." "Yes, we know the story," Bradley waved dismissively. "But sentiment doesn't pay for medical bills or assisted living facilities." The conversation was moving in a direction that made my skin crawl. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Bradley leaned forward, suddenly animated. "I've done some research. That corner property is worth at least $2 million, maybe more. With the right development, Grandpa could sell the building, retire comfortably, and move somewhere more appropriate for his age and health needs." Somewhere more appropriate. I set down my fork with more force than necessary. That cafe is his home, his history, his connection to Grandma Ruth. "Claire," Dad said in his patient, condescending tone, "we understand you're attached to the romantic idea of it all, but we have to be practical. Harold isn't getting any younger, and the cafe isn't exactly profitable." "How would you know whether it's profitable?" I snapped. "When's the last time any of you actually visited him there?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "That's not the point," Mom said defensively. "The point is that your grandfather needs family looking out for his best interests." "I'm looking out for his best interests," I replied. "I'm there every day. I see how much that place means to him." Bradley pulled out a folder. "Actually, I've been doing some research into his financial situation. Did you know he's been declining rental offers for years? The building could generate serious income if it was properly managed." "Rental offers?" My voice came out higher than intended. "Commercial tenants willing to pay triple what that little coffee shop brings in." Bradley spread papers across the table like he was presenting evidence in court. "Grandpa Harold is sitting on a gold mine and refusing to capitalize on it." I stared at the documents, my mind reeling. "Have you discussed any of this with him?" "Not directly," Dad admitted. "We thought it would be better coming from you, since you spend so much time with him." The trap was becoming clear. They wanted me to be their messenger, to convince Grandpa Harold to give up everything he loved because it made financial sense to them. "No," I said quietly. "No what?" Bradley asked. "No, I won't help you manipulate him into selling his cafe." Bradley's expression hardened. "Manipulate, Claire? We're talking about ensuring he has proper care as he ages. Would you rather he end up in some state-funded nursing home because he was too stubborn to make smart financial decisions? I'd rather he spend his remaining years surrounded by the things and places he loves, with family who respect his choices." "That's very noble," Mom said sharply. But nobility doesn't pay for round-the-clock medical care when he needs it. The dinner continued with increasing tension. Bradley presented more financial projections, property assessments, retirement community brochures. My parents nodded along, occasionally making supportive comments about difficult but necessary decisions. I picked at my lasagna, wondering what my family had become a panel of. Financial advisors, plotting to dismantle an old man's happiness for profit. Every suggestion sounded reasonable on the surface, but underneath was the clear message that Grandpa Harold's emotional attachment to his cafe was an inconvenient obstacle to maximizing real estate value. The bottom line, Bradley said as Mom served dessert, is that Grandpa needs family who will make tough decisions for him when he can't make them himself. He's perfectly capable of making his own decisions, I protested. Is he, though? Bradley's voice took on the cross-examination tone he probably used in court. You said yourself he's been having health issues, memory problems, difficulty managing the business. I never said he had memory problems. You didn't have to. I can see the signs when I visit. The casual way he said it made my blood run cold. When you visit, I stop by occasionally, just checking in. Bradley's smile was predatory. It's important to document these things properly. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't about Grandpa Harold's welfare. This was about inheritance. This was about positioning themselves as the responsible family members who tried to help an elderly man make sound financial decisions. And somehow, I become the obstacle they needed to overcome. Have you ever realized mid-conversation that your own family was planning something that would devastate someone you love? The feeling is like ice water in your veins, especially when you realize they expect you to help them do it. Tuesday morning, Grandpa Harold didn't show up. By 6:30, I was genuinely worried. He'd never missed a morning without calling, and his phone went straight to voicemail. I used my key to check his apartment above the cafe, calling his name as I climbed the narrow stairs. I found him collapsed in his bedroom, conscious but unable to get up. His face was gray, breathing in short, labored gasps. "Claire," he whispered, "I think I'm having a heart attack." The ambulance ride to Mount Sinai passed in a blur of sirens and medical terminology I didn't understand. Grandpa Harold squeezed my hand weakly, and I kept repeating, "You're going to be okay," like a mantra that could make it true. In the emergency room, I called my parents and Bradley, leaving frantic voicemails. Then I sat in that uncomfortable waiting room chair, still wearing my coffee-stained apron, trying not to think about how fragile he'd looked. Bradley arrived first, in his lawyer uniform, carrying his briefcase, like he was heading to a business meeting. "How is he?" he asked, settling beside me. "They're running tests. The doctor said it was definitely a heart attack, but they need to determine how much damage was done." Bradley nodded, pulling out his phone. "I should call his primary care physician, get his medical records transferred. Do you know if he has a living will?" The question struck me as oddly premature. "I don't think so. We've never discussed anything like that." "Well, we'll need to address that, along with power of attorney, medical directives, all the legal protections an elderly person should have in place." My parents arrived 20 minutes later, Mom clutching her purse like a shield, Dad looking uncomfortable. We sat together, making stilted conversation and pretending we weren't all thinking about mortality. Dr. Rodriguez emerged after what felt like hours. She was young, competent-looking, with kind eyes. "Mr. Morrison is stable," she began, and I felt my shoulders relax for the first time. "He did suffer a moderate heart attack. We've got him on medication." "What's the prognosis?" Bradley asked, already in lawyer mode. "With proper care and lifestyle modifications, he should be able to live comfortably for years. However, this was a warning. He'll need regular monitoring, medication management, and some adjustments to his daily routine." Dad leaned forward. "What kind of adjustments?" "Reduced stress, lighter physical activity, better dietary management, the kind of changes that often require family support or professional care assistance." I saw Bradley and my parents exchange meaningful looks. This was exactly the opening they'd been hoping for. "Can we see him?" I asked. Grandpa Harold looked smaller in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines, but his eyes were alert. He managed a weak smile. "Did you close the cafe properly?" he asked, and I almost started crying. Don't worry about the cafe, Grandpa. I took care of everything. My parents made appropriate concerned noises. Bradley stood at the foot of the bed, studying Grandpa Harold. Harold, Dad said carefully, the doctor mentioned you'll need some lifestyle changes. We want to help however we can. I appreciate that, David, but I'm tougher than I look. Of course you are, Mom said soothingly. But maybe this is a good time to think about making things easier on yourself. Less stress, fewer responsibilities. I watched Grandpa Harold's face. His jaw tightened slightly. The only sign he understood the subtext. The cafe keeps me young, he said firmly. Ruth and I built something special there. I'm not ready to give that up. No one's asking you to give anything up, Bradley said smoothly. We're just exploring options that might allow you to enjoy retirement without the daily pressures of running a business. Grandpa Harold looked directly at me. What do you think, Claire? All eyes turned to me. This was the moment my family had been building toward, the test of whose side I was really on. I could feel Bradley's expectant stare, my parents' hopeful attention, the weight of their collective assumption that I'd help them convince him to be reasonable. I think, I said slowly, that you should do whatever makes you happiest. If running the cafe gives you joy and purpose, then that's what matters. The disappointment on their faces was immediate and obvious. Bradley's expression hardened. Mom looked like I'd personally betrayed her. Claire, Dad said in his warning tone, I don't think you're considering all the factors here. I'm considering the only factor that matters, I replied. Grandpa Harold's wishes. Grandpa Harold squeezed my hand. Thank you, sweetheart. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. My family spent another 10 minutes making polite conversation, but the underlying message was clear. I had chosen the wrong side, and there would be consequences. As we prepared to leave, Bradley lingered by Grandpa Harold's bedside. I hope you'll think about what we discussed, Harold. Family just wants what's best for you. I know you do, son, and I appreciate your concern. But I heard something in Grandpa Harold's voice that made me pause. It wasn't gratitude. It was the careful politeness of someone who'd recognized a threat and was buying time to figure out how to respond. Walking to the parking garage, Bradley caught up with me while our parents went ahead. That was a mistake, Claire, he said quietly. What was a mistake? Encouraging him to keep that cafe. You're enabling a fantasy that could end up hurting him. I'm supporting his right to make his own decisions. Bradley stopped walking. His own decisions, Claire? He just had a heart attack. He can barely manage his medication, let alone run a business. And you're feeding into his delusions because it makes you feel needed. The accusation hit like a slap. That's not what this is about, isn't it? You've been playing house at that cafe for months, pretending you're helping him when really you're just avoiding your own life. Now you're so invested in this little fantasy that you can't see what's best for him. And what's best for him is selling everything he loves so you can get your hands on the inheritance? Bradley's face went cold. Careful, Claire. You're starting to sound paranoid. But the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't paranoia. This was strategy. And somehow, I just made myself an enemy. Grandpa Harold came home from the hospital 3 days later, armed with a pharmacy's worth of medications and a list of restrictions that would have discouraged a less determined man. He was supposed to avoid stress, limit physical activity, and attend regular cardiology appointments. What he actually did was unlock Golden Mornings at 5:03 a.m. sharp and start brewing coffee like nothing had happened. Grandpa, I protested, finding him behind the counter, adjusting the espresso machine. You're supposed to be taking it easy. This is taking it easy, he replied with a stubbornness I'd inherited. I'm sitting down more, see? He gestured to the stool he'd placed behind the register. Doctor's orders. The compromise we reached was that I'd handle all the physical tasks, lifting, bending, while he supervised and handled the register. It wasn't ideal, but it kept him engaged in the work he loved while protecting his recovering heart. What I didn't expect was how this new arrangement would affect our morning conversations. Claire, he said during a quiet moment, I've been thinking about what your family said at the hospital. My stomach tightened. What about it? They're not wrong about the practical concerns. This place is a lot of work, and I'm not getting any younger. He paused, studying my face. But there are things they don't understand about this building, about what your grandmother and I built here. What do you mean? Grandpa Harold glanced around, then pulled out a manila envelope from under the register. Your grandmother was brilliant with money, Claire. Much better than anyone gave her credit for. While I was focused on making great coffee, she was making great investments. He opened the envelope, showing me documents I'd never seen. Property deeds, investment statements, bank records dating back decades. The Golden Mornings franchise wasn't just profitable, it was extraordinarily profitable. When we sold the other locations, Ruth insisted we keep the proceeds in long-term investments rather than spending them. She said we were building something for the future. I stared at the numbers. Grandpa, these amounts are much larger than anyone realizes. He finished, including your family. The implications were staggering. If these documents were accurate, Grandpa Harold wasn't the struggling retiree my family imagined. He was quietly wealthy, sitting on millions while living modestly and pouring his heart into a small corner cafe. Why haven't you told anyone? I asked. Because money changes people, Claire. Look at how your family is acting based on what they think I'm worth. Imagine how they'd behave if they knew the truth. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? Your brother has been asking very specific questions about my finances. Your parents keep bringing up elder care facilities and suggesting I need professional money management. They think I'm a confused old man who needs protection from his own poor decisions. I thought about Bradley's visits, his pointed questions. They think you need a guardian. Exactly. And guardianship laws are written to protect people, but they can also be manipulated by family members who think they know better. Grandpa Harold's voice was grim. I've seen it happen to friends, adult children who convince courts that their elderly parents are incompetent, then take control of their assets. The coffee shop suddenly felt smaller, more vulnerable. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure my wishes are protected, no matter what happens to me. He returned the documents to the envelope. And I'm going to trust the one person in this family who's never asked me for anything. Before I could respond, the bell chimed. Detective Morrison entered, but instead of his usual grunt, he approached with purpose. Harold, he said, good to see you back on your feet. How are you feeling? Better, every day. Thanks for asking. Detective Morrison glanced at me, then back at Grandpa Harold. Mind if I have a word? Privately, they moved to the far corner table, speaking in voices too low for me to hear. I tried to focus on cleaning, but their body language was serious, urgent. Detective Morrison was taking notes, Grandpa Harold speaking with intensity. After 10 minutes, they shook hands. Detective Morrison approached the counter to pay. Everything okay? I asked. Just catching up with an old friend, he replied. But his eyes held a warning. You take care of yourself, Claire, and keep your eyes open. After he left, Grandpa Harold returned to his stool. He looked tired but determined. What was that about? I asked. Insurance, he said simply. The kind that protects against more than fire and theft. The rest of the morning passed quietly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that forces were moving around us. During the lunch lull, Grandpa Harold pulled out a business card and handed it to me. I need you to call this attorney and make an appointment for next week. Tell him Harold Morrison referred you, and that it's urgent. I looked at the card. Margaret Shun, estate planning attorney. Grandpa, what's going on? I'm making sure that when I'm gone, the right person inherits what Ruth and I built together. His eyes met mine. The person who loves this place the way we did. The person who never once asked what it might be worth to them. My phone buzzed. A text from Bradley. Lunch tomorrow. Need to discuss Grandpa's care plan. Looking at that message, then at the business card, I realized we were in a race. My family was planning something, and Grandpa Harold was planning something else entirely. Only one of us could win. Margaret Chin's law office was everything Bradley's wasn't. Warm, welcoming, with family photos and comfortable chairs. She listened carefully as Grandpa Harold explained, occasionally taking notes. So, you want to ensure your estate goes to your granddaughter, despite potential challenges from other family members? She summarized. More than that, Grandpa Harold said, I want to make sure she has the resources to fight any legal challenges they might mount, and I want to protect her from feeling guilty about it. Margaret Chin looked at me. Claire, Do you understand what your grandfather is considering? I glanced at Grandpa Harold, then back at the attorney. I think so, but I need to know, is my family really planning to challenge his wishes? Based on their behavior and questions, Grandpa Harold said sadly, I believe they are. They've already started building a case that I'm not competent to make financial decisions. Margaret nodded. Unfortunately, this is more common than people realize. Adult children sometimes convince themselves they're protecting elderly parents when they're actually pursuing their own interests. She outlined the legal protections, a comprehensive will with specific language about mental competency, a living trust, medical directives. Most importantly, detailed documentation of his current mental state and decision-making capacity. I'll need witnesses who can testify to your competence, she explained. People who interact with you regularly and can speak to your mental clarity. Detective Morrison has been documenting our conversations, Grandpa Harold said. He's seen how Bradley and my son-in-law behave when they visit the cafe. Margaret Chin made a note. That's excellent. Police officers make credible witnesses in competency hearings. Over the next hour, we went through every detail. The cafe building and business would go to me, along with the investment portfolio. There were specific bequests from my parents, generous, but not enough to make them wealthy. Bradley would receive exactly $1 and a handwritten note explaining why. The note is crucial, Margaret Chin explained. It shows this wasn't an oversight, but a deliberate decision based on his behavior. As we left, she handed me a thick folder. These are copies of everything. Keep them somewhere safe, somewhere your family can't access them. And Claire, she looked at me seriously, be prepared for this to get ugly. When people discover they're not inheriting what they expected, they can become very creative about challenging wills. The drive back was quiet. I could see Grandpa Harold was exhausted by the emotional weight of planning for his own death. Do you think I'm being unfair? He asked. I think you're being realistic, I replied. They've shown you exactly who they are. It breaks my heart, you know. I love your parents. And despite everything, I love Bradley too. But love doesn't mean enabling behavior that would destroy everything Ruth and I worked for. That evening, I called the attorney Margaret Shun, recommended for me personally. An estate contest can drag on for years, he warned. They're expensive, emotionally draining, and they often tear families apart permanently. Are you prepared for that possibility? I thought about Bradley's condescending smirks, my parents' dismissive attitude, the way they'd all assumed I'd help them manipulate him. I'm prepared to honor my grandfather's wishes, I said. My phone rang as soon as I hung up. Bradley. Claire, we need to talk tomorrow. Lunch. That place near your apartment. It's about Grandpa's future care. What about his future care? I'll explain tomorrow. But Claire, this is serious. We've been consulting with specialists about elderly care, and there are some things you need to understand about his condition. The call ended. I stared at my phone, wondering what specialists they'd been consulting and what conclusions they'd reached about Grandpa Harold's mental state. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret Chen's warning, Detective Morrison's advice to keep my eyes open, the folder of legal documents, the family dinner. Most of all, I thought about Grandpa Harold's question, do you think I'm being unfair? The answer was no. But fair and easy were two very different things. And something told me that the easy part of the story was over. The next morning, Grandpa Harold seemed different, more alert, more determined. He moved around the cafe with purpose, straightening photographs, adjusting chairs, like he was preparing for something important. Big day ahead, I asked. In a way, he replied. Today we start fighting back. I was about to ask what he meant when the bell chimed. But instead of our usual customers, two people in expensive suits entered. A woman with a briefcase and a man with an official-looking folder. Mr. Harold Morrison? The woman asked. That's me. I'm Dr. Sarah Williams, and this is Mr. James Parker from Adult Protective Services. We've received concerns about your welfare and capacity to live independently. My blood turned to ice. They made their move. The war for Grandpa Harold's life had officially begun. Dr. Williams opened her briefcase. Mr. Morrison, we're here to conduct a welfare assessment based on concerns raised by your family regarding your mental capacity and living situation. I watched Grandpa Harold's face carefully. Instead of the confusion or panic my family probably expected, I saw something else entirely: calm preparation. "Of course," he said pleasantly, "though I should mention that my attorney advised me this might happen. Margaret Shun, you can verify my legal representation if needed." Mr. Parker looked surprised. "You've retained legal counsel? A man my age would be foolish not to protect his interests, don't you think? Especially when family members have been asking unusual questions about my finances and suggesting I'm incompetent to manage my own affairs." Dr. Williams pulled out a tablet. "We'll need to conduct some cognitive assessments and discuss your daily living situation. Can you tell me what day it is?" For the next 30 minutes, Grandpa Harold answered every question with sharp precision. Date, time, current president, simple math problems, memory recall tests. He explained his daily routine, his medication schedule, his business operations, with the clarity of someone half his age. "And you run this establishment alone?" Dr. Williams asked. "With help from my granddaughter," he replied, "who assists voluntarily because she cares about preserving our family legacy." "I see. And your family members who contacted us expressed concern that you're being influenced or manipulated by Claire." Grandpa Harold actually chuckled. "In 6 months of working here, Claire has never once asked me for money, suggested changes to my will, or pressured me to make any financial decisions. Can the same be said for the family members who initiated this assessment?" Mr. Parker shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, we're just following protocol." "Of course you are, and I appreciate your diligence in protecting elderly citizens. But I'd like to know specifically what concerns were raised and by whom." Dr. Williams consulted her notes. "The report indicates you've been displaying confusion, making poor financial decisions, and potentially being exploited by someone with access to your business." "Interesting. Could you tell me when these observations were made, and who made them?" The question hung in the air. I could see both officials realizing their information was secondhand at best. "We'll need to interview other parties," Dr. Williams said finally, "including your granddaughter. Claire has been caring for this business and for me without compensation for months," Grandpa Harold said. "If that's exploitation, then I've been the beneficiary of the most generous exploitation in history." After they left, promising to return with follow-up questions, Grandpa Harold and I sat in stunned silence. "How did you know this was coming?" I asked. "Detective Morrison warned me. Apparently, your brother has been asking questions around the neighborhood about my declining mental state. Building a case." My phone buzzed. A text from Bradley. "Lunch canceled. Family emergency. We'll call later." I showed Grandpa Harold the message. "He knows the assessment didn't go the way he planned. This is just the beginning, Claire. They'll try other approaches." He was right. Over the next few days, my family's strategy became clear. Mom started calling the cafe regularly, ostensibly to check on Grandpa, but really to ask leading questions about his health and decision-making. Dad stopped by with pamphlets about assisted living facilities. Bradley's approach was more direct. He arrived Thursday afternoon with a briefcase. "Harold," he said, settling into a chair like he was conducting a business meeting, "I've been researching your options for financial management and estate planning. There are some concerning gaps in your current arrangements." Grandpa Harold looked up from the coffee he was brewing. "What kind of gaps?" "Well, for instance, you don't have a power of attorney designated. If something happens to you medically, no one has legal authority to manage your affairs." "I see. And you're volunteering for this responsibility?" "I think it makes sense for someone with legal expertise to handle these matters. I've drafted some documents that would give me limited power of attorney, just for financial and medical decisions, if you become incapacitated." I watched this exchange with growing horror. Bradley was trying to get Grandpa Harold to sign away his autonomy voluntarily. "That's very thoughtful," Grandpa Harold said mildly. "But I should probably have my own attorney review any legal documents before signing them. Margaret Shun is very thorough about these things." Bradley's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, though I should mention that Margaret Shun isn't really an expert in elder law. You might want someone with more specialized experience." "Funny thing about that," Grandpa Harold replied, still focused on the coffee machine. "Margaret Shun has been practicing elder law for 15 years. won numerous cases protecting elderly clients from family exploitation. I did my research quite thoroughly. The temperature in the cafe seemed to drop 10 degrees. Bradley realized he'd underestimated his opponent. Harold, I hope you're not being influenced by people who might not have your best interests at heart. You mean like family members who want me to sign legal documents, giving them control over my assets? Grandpa Harold turned around, and his expression was no longer mild. Bradley, I've known you since you were 5 years old. I watched you grow up, supported your education, celebrated your successes. But what you're trying to do now isn't love. It's greed. Bradley stood up, his face flushed. That's not fair. We're worried about you. No, you're worried about inheritance. There's a difference. Fine. Bradley snapped, his mask finally slipping. But you should know that if you continue down this path, if you keep listening to people who are obviously manipulating you, this family will do whatever it takes to protect you from your own poor judgment. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Bradley gathered his documents and left. The bell chimed behind him with unusual violence. Well, Grandpa Harold said, returning to his coffee preparation. Now we know where we stand. That evening, Margaret Chen called with an update. I've received notice that your family has petitioned for a competency hearing. They're claiming you're being financially exploited and need a court-appointed guardian. My stomach dropped. When? 2 weeks. But Claire, I need you to understand something. This kind of legal action often succeeds. Even when the elderly person is completely competent, judges err on the side of caution when family members express concern. What does that mean? It means we need to be prepared for the possibility that your grandfather could lose legal control over his own life. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. What do you think will happen next? Can an elderly man fight his own family's attempt to control him? Or will love and manipulation win over justice? Drop your predictions in the comments below. The competency hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in family court, a sterile room that smelled of industrial cleaner and broken dreams. Grandpa Harold sat beside Margaret Chen at the defendant's table. And yes, that's what it felt like. A trial where loving your granddaughter and wanting to control your own life had become crimes. Across the aisle, Bradley sat with his hired attorney, Patricia Hawthorne, a sharp-looking woman who specialized in elder law. Behind them, my parents looked uncomfortable but determined, like people who'd convinced themselves they were doing the right thing, even as it felt completely wrong. Judge Morrison, no relation to Detective Morrison, unfortunately, was a tired-looking man in his 60s who'd probably seen every variation of family greed disguised as concern. This is a petition for guardianship of Harold Morrison, he began, filed by family members expressing concern for his mental capacity and susceptibility to financial exploitation. Miss Hawthorne stood first. Your Honor, the petitioners love Mr. Morrison dearly, but they've observed concerning changes in his behavior and judgment. He's been manipulated into making decisions that are not in his best interests, including refusing profitable business opportunities and allowing an untrained individual to manage his financial affairs. She presented their case methodically. Grandpa Harold's recent heart attack proved his declining health. His refusal to consider assisted living showed poor judgment. His reliance on me for business operations demonstrated diminished capacity. She even had a psychological evaluation from a doctor who'd interviewed him for 30 minutes and concluded he showed signs of mild cognitive impairment. Furthermore, Miss Hawthorne continued, Mr. Morrison has recently made significant changes to his estate planning. Changes that inexplicably benefit one granddaughter while excluding other family members who've expressed legitimate concerns about his welfare. When it was Margaret Chen's turn, she stood with the confidence of someone who'd fought this battle many times. Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of case that elder law exists to prevent. Adult children who want control over an elderly parent's assets have convinced themselves that love justifies legal manipulation. She called Detective Morrison as our first witness. He testified about his daily interactions with Grandpa Harold, his observations of the family dynamics, and his professional assessment of who was really trying to exploit whom. In my experience, Detective Morrison said, people who are genuinely concerned about an elderly person's welfare don't start by trying to gain legal control over their assets. They start by spending time with them, understanding their wishes, and supporting their autonomy. Dr. Williams from Adult Protective Services testified next, and her assessment was devastating to my family's case. Mr. Morrison displayed complete mental clarity during our evaluation. His answers were precise. His reasoning was sound, and his understanding of his situation was remarkably sophisticated. I found no evidence of cognitive impairment or susceptibility to manipulation. But the most powerful testimony came from Mrs. Patterson, our regular customer. "Harold is sharp as a tack," she said firmly. "He remembers my coffee order, asks about my grandchildren by name, and gives the most sensible advice about everything from finances to relationships." Meanwhile, his son and grandson treat him like he's a confused old man who can't tie his own shoes. It's shameful. When Grandpa Harold took the stand, he was magnificent. "Your Honor," he said, "I've been managing my own affairs for 82 years. I built a successful business, raised a family, and accumulated assets through careful planning and hard work. The only thing that's changed is that some family members have realized I might leave my money to someone who actually loves me, rather than someone who sees me as a retirement plan." He gestured toward Bradley and my parents. "They call it love, but love doesn't involve deceiving social services or hiring attorneys to strip away my legal rights. Love respects a person's wishes, even when those wishes are financially inconvenient." Miss Hawthorne tried to shake his testimony during cross-examination, but Grandpa Harold was unflappable. He answered every question clearly, demonstrated perfect recall of financial details, and calmly explained his reasoning for every decision they questioned. "Mr. Morrison," she said finally, "don't you think it's concerning that you're leaving the majority of your estate to someone who works for you every day? Doesn't that relationship create a conflict of interest?" "Miss Hawthorne," Grandpa Harold replied, "Claire doesn't work for me. She works with me by choice, without compensation, because she loves what we've built together. If that creates a conflict of interest, then every parent who leaves money to a caring child is engaging in financial impropriety." The judge called a recess, and we waited in the hallway. Bradley paced, occasionally conferring with his attorney in heated whispers. My parents sat stiffly on a bench, looking like they were beginning to realize they'd made a terrible mistake. "How do you think it went?" I asked Margaret Chen. "Better than expected," she replied. Judge Morrison seemed skeptical of their claims from the beginning, but you never know how these things will turn out. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Morrison's expression was stern. "After reviewing all testimony and evidence, this court finds no basis for the appointment of a guardian for Harold Morrison. Mr. Morrison demonstrated complete mental competency and sound reasoning for his decisions. This petition appears to be motivated more by family members' financial expectations than by genuine concern for Mr. Morrison's welfare." The relief was overwhelming. Grandpa Harold squeezed my hand, and I saw tears in his eyes. "Furthermore," Judge Morrison continued, "this court is concerned by the apparent coordination between family members to present Mr. Morrison as incompetent when evidence suggests the opposite. Such actions can constitute elder abuse under state law." Bradley went pale. My parents looked sick. "Mr. Morrison, you are free to continue managing your own affairs without interference. This court will note in its records that any future petitions regarding your competency should be viewed with extreme skepticism." Walking out of that courthouse felt like victory, but it was a hollow kind of triumph. We'd won the legal battle, but where it cost us our family. In the parking lot, my parents approached hesitantly. "Harold," Dad said, "we never meant for things to go this far." "But they did go this far, David. You tried to have me declared incompetent because you didn't like my decisions about my own life." Mom was crying. "We were worried about you." "No, you were worried about inheritance. There's a difference." Bradley stood apart, his face a mask of cold fury. He'd lost more than a legal case. He'd lost his expected financial security. "This isn't over," he said quietly as he passed us. "Yes, it is," Grandpa Harold replied. "For you, it's completely over." That evening, back at Golden Mornings, Grandpa Harold and I sat in our favorite corner booth, sharing a piece of apple pie. "Do you regret it?" I asked. Losing your family over this? Claire, I didn't lose my family. I discovered I never really had the family I thought I did. He paused, stirring his coffee. But I still have you, and that's enough. I didn't know it then, but that would be our last quiet evening together. 3 weeks after the court hearing, Grandpa Harold didn't wake up. I found him peaceful in his bed, his medication bottles neatly arranged, a letter with my name on it prominently on his dresser. The doctor said his heart simply gave out during sleep, the kindest possible ending for someone who'd fought so hard to live on his own terms. But kindness and grief don't cancel each other out. I sat in that apartment above the cafe and cried for everything we'd lost and everything we'd never have. His letter was brief but clear. Claire, by the time you read this, the second phase of this battle will be beginning. My will is ironclad, but that won't stop them from trying. Use the resources I've left you to fight them properly. The cafe is yours, but more importantly, the freedom to choose your own life is yours. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Love, Grandpa Harold. The funeral was a tense affair. My family attended, of course, but they sat in the back while I sat in the front with Mrs. Patterson, Detective Morrison, and the other people who'd actually known and loved Harold Morrison. The pastor spoke about a man who'd built something beautiful and had the courage to protect it, even from his own family. Bradley and my parents didn't speak to me, but I felt their eyes on my back. They were planning something. I could sense the wheels turning. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. Margaret Shun insisted on conducting it in her office, rather than somewhere my family might feel more comfortable mounting challenges. When Tuesday arrived, we gathered in her conference room like opposing armies. Margaret Shun opened the proceedings with professional formality. We are here for the reading of Harold Morrison's last will and testament, properly witnessed and notarized. She began with the smaller bequests, $10,000 each to Mrs. Patterson and Detective Morrison for their friendship and loyalty, $50,000 each to my parents in recognition of their role in raising Claire to be the kind of person who deserves this inheritance. Then came Bradley's bequest. To my grandson, Bradley Morrison, I leave the sum of $1 in this message. You had every opportunity to earn my respect and my trust. Instead, you chose greed over love, manipulation over honesty. I hope someday you understand the difference. Bradley's face turned red, then white, then red again. This is insane. He was clearly not competent when he wrote this. Mr. Morrison, Margaret Shun said calmly, we literally just had a court hearing that established your grandfather's complete mental competency. Would you like to challenge a legal determination made 3 weeks ago? She continued, reading, the cafe building, the business, and the investment portfolio worth approximately $6 million would go to me, along with the family home by the lake that everyone thought had been sold years ago. Furthermore, Margaret Shun read, Harold Morrison has established a trust fund of $1 million specifically to defend this will against any legal challenges. Claire Morrison is to spare no expense in protecting her inheritance from family members who believe they deserve what they never earned. The room erupted. My parents demanded to know how Harold had accumulated so much wealth without telling anyone. Bradley threatened to contest everything and accused me of manipulating a vulnerable elderly man. Through it all, I sat quietly, remembering Grandpa Harold's words about grace under pressure. Are you finished? I asked when their shouting finally subsided. Claire, Mom said, tears streaming. You can't seriously think this is what Harold would have wanted. Dividing the family like this. Mom, the family divided itself. Grandpa Harold just recognized what had already happened. Dad leaned forward desperately. Think about this rationally. You can't possibly manage all these assets alone. You need family support, financial guidance. From the same people who tried to have him declared incompetent. I stood up, surprised by how calm I felt. Dad, I don't need your financial guidance. I need you to respect the decisions of a man you claim to love. Bradley finally exploded. This is ridiculous. You manipulated a sick old man into changing his will. I'm going to contest this, and I'm going to prove you coerced him. With what evidence? I asked. The court already determined he was completely competent. Detective Morrison documented your attempts to manipulate him. Dr. Williams testified that he showed no signs of cognitive impairment. What exactly are you going to contest? Margaret Chun intervened. Mr. Bradley Morrison, I should inform you that contesting this would be expensive and time-consuming, with very little chance of success. Your grandfather anticipated this possibility and prepared accordingly. She handed Bradley a thick folder. These are depositions from 12 witnesses who interacted with your grandfather regularly. Bank records showing he managed his own finances competently, medical records confirming his mental clarity, and recordings of conversations where you and your parents discussed strategies for convincing him to sell his property. Bradley's face went ash gray. Recordings? Your grandfather was more tech-savvy than you realized. He installed a security system in the cafe after you started visiting regularly. Margaret Chin's voice was matter-of-fact. Everything is perfectly legal and admissible in court. The fight went out at him all at once. My parents looked devastated, not just by the money they'd lost, but by the realization that their own words had been captured, that their private conversations revealed motivations they'd tried to hide even from themselves. Why? Mom whispered. Why would he do this to us? He didn't do anything to you, I replied quietly. He made choices about his own life and his own money. The fact that those choices don't benefit you doesn't make them wrong. As my family filed out, defeated and bitter, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, but sadness. This victory had cost me the illusion that we were a loving family who would support each other. But it had also given me something invaluable. The freedom to build the life I wanted, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, rather than what I could provide. Margaret Chin handed me the keys to everything Grandpa Harold had built. What will you do first? I thought about the plans I'd secretly been making, the dreams I'd been afraid to voice while my family treated me like their personal servant. I'm going to build something beautiful, I said. Something that would make both my grandparents proud. And for the first time in my life, I had the resources to make that happen. 6 months after inheriting Grandpa Harold's empire, I learned that having money doesn't automatically solve problems. It just creates better quality problems to solve. Like discovering that the small corner cafe actually came with commercial real estate worth $4 million. Or realizing that the investment portfolio included shares in companies I'd never heard of, but apparently owned significant pieces of. The biggest surprise came when I explored the lake house that everyone thought had been sold. It wasn't just a house. It was a compound. Grandpa Harold and Grandma Ruth had quietly assembled 23 acres of lakefront property, complete with the original farmhouse, a guest cottage, and enough land for the expansion plans I found in Ruth's careful handwriting. She wanted to create a retreat center, Margaret Chun explained, showing me the detailed business plans Ruth had drawn up in the 1980s. A place where families could reconnect, where people could learn traditional skills. She had very specific ideas about community building. Reading through Grandma Ruth's notes felt like receiving messages from beyond the grave. She'd envisioned exactly what I was planning to do with the Golden Mornings brand. Create spaces where people felt valued, supported, and genuinely cared for. The modernized cafe had reopened 3 months ago, and the changes were dramatic. I kept everything that made it special. The corner where Grandpa Harold and Grandma Ruth had their first date, the mismatched chairs that felt like home, the warmth that made strangers into regulars. But I'd also added professional-grade equipment, expanded the menu to include Ruth's original recipes, and created an atmosphere that felt both nostalgic and fresh. The Instagram account I'd started as an experiment now had 40,000 followers who came for the coffee but stayed for the stories. I shared Grandpa Harold's wisdom, Ruth's recipes, and the daily adventures of rebuilding something beautiful. The response was overwhelming. People wanted what we were offering, that sense of belonging in an increasingly disconnected world. But the most satisfying change was the most subtle one. Instead of hiding behind the counter, feeling ashamed of my work, I moved through the cafe with confidence. I knew every customer's name, their favorite orders, their family situations. I'd hired 2 part-time employees who understood that this wasn't just a job, but a mission to create genuine community. Claire, Sarah Martinez, my new assistant manager, approached with the kind of expression that meant either very good news or very bad news. "There's someone here to see you. Says he's your brother." Through the front windows, I could see Bradley pacing on the sidewalk. He'd lost weight, and his usually perfect appearance was slightly disheveled. The expensive suit was still there, but it hung differently, like it belonged to someone who'd lost more than money. "Send him in," I said. Bradley entered Golden Mornings, looking like a man visiting a foreign country where he didn't speak the language. He glanced around at the bustling café, the laughing customers, the obvious prosperity, with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Claire," he said, approaching the counter. "You look successful." "I'm successful," I replied evenly. "What can I do for you, Bradley?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I was hoping we could talk privately." I gestured toward the corner booth where Grandpa Harold and I used to share our evening conversations. Bradley slid into the seat across from me, and for a moment, he looked like the older brother who'd once helped me with homework and taught me to ride a bike. "I made mistakes," he said without preamble. "Big ones. And I've had 6 months to think about them." "Go on." "The law firm let me go. Apparently, try to manipulate elderly relatives into signing over financial control doesn't reflect well on one's professional ethics." His laugh was bitter. "Who knew?" I waited for the rest of it. "Lisa left me too. Took half of everything in the divorce and made it clear that she couldn't respect someone who'd stooped to trying to steal from his own grandfather." Bradley ran his hands through his hair. "She was right about all of it. What do you want from me, Bradley?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "Forgiveness, maybe? A chance to be part of your life again? I know I don't deserve it, but I miss you. I miss having a sister. I miss being part of a family that isn't completely dysfunctional." He looked around the cafe again. "You built something amazing here, Claire. Grandpa Harold would be so proud." The admission caught me off guard. For 6 months, I'd imagined this confrontation as either hostile or manipulative. I hadn't expected raw honesty. "You tried to have our grandfather declared incompetent," I said quietly. "You conspired with our parents to manipulate him into giving up everything he loved. You treated me like hired help for years and then acted shocked when he left me his money instead of you. I know all of that is true, and all of it was wrong." Bradley's voice was steady. "I can't undo any of it, but I can acknowledge it and try to be different going forward. Why should I believe that you've changed? Because losing everything teaches you what actually matters. I had money, status, a successful career, and a beautiful wife. But none of it was built on anything real. When it all fell apart, I realized I'd been chasing the wrong things my entire life." He paused, watching a young couple. "What you have here, what Grandpa Harold had with Grandma Ruth. What you're building, this is real. This matters." I was too stupid and greedy to see it before. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation. But all I saw was exhaustion and genuine regret. "What are you doing now?" I asked. "Working at a small firm in Queens. Personal injury cases, mostly. The pay is terrible, but the work feels more honest than what I was doing before." He smiled ruefully. "I'm learning that there's dignity in serving people who actually need help, rather than people who want to exploit their relatives." We sat in silence for a few minutes. "I don't know if we can go back to being brother and sister," I said finally. "Too much has happened. I understand. But maybe we can figure out how to be something new, something based on who we are now, rather than who we used to be." Bradley's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that. It won't be easy, and it won't be fast. You'll have to prove that you've actually changed. Not just say it." "I will, however long it takes." I pulled out my phone and showed him the Instagram account. "See this? 40,000 people following the story of Golden Mornings. They're not just customers. They're a community. They come here because they want to be part of something real, something that values people over profit." Bradley scrolled through the posts. "This is incredible, Claire. You're helping people. That's the point. Grandpa Harold and Grandma Ruth didn't just build a business. They built a place where people mattered. I'm trying to honor that legacy while making it my own. How can I be part of that, if you'll let me?" I thought about Grandpa Harold's letter, about grace under pressure, and choosing love over bitterness. Start by visiting Mom and Dad. They're struggling too, and they need someone to help them understand what went wrong. Be the son they need, not the son who wants something from them. Bradley nodded. And then we'll see. Family isn't just about blood, Bradley. It's about choice. Every day, we choose whether to support each other or tear each other down. Make better choices, and maybe we can build something worth having. As he prepared to leave, Bradley turned back. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Not because of the money or the success, but because you found a way to forgive us, even when we didn't deserve it. I'm not forgiving you for your sake, I replied. I'm doing it for mine. Carrying anger around is exhausting, and I have better things to do with my energy. After he left, I sat in that corner booth and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of it, the beginning of something new. Margaret Chun had been right about family conflicts. They often tear relationships apart permanently. But sometimes, if you're very lucky and everyone involved is willing to do the hard work of change, they can also create space for something better to grow. I wasn't ready to trust Bradley completely. That would take time and consistent proof that he truly changed. But I was ready to give him the chance to earn that trust, because that's what family should be. Not people who get your love automatically, but people who work every day to deserve it. 1 year after Grandpa Harold's death, Golden Mornings had become something neither he nor Grandma Ruth could have imagined, though I think they would have loved every bit of it. What started as a single cafe had grown into 3 locations across Manhattan, each one adapted to serve its unique neighborhood while maintaining the original's warmth and authenticity. We'd also launched a coffee roasting operation, a line of Ruth's original baked goods sold in local grocery stores, and a nonprofit foundation that helped other family businesses resist corporate buyouts. But the most meaningful expansion was the retreat center at the Lake House, where we offered workshops on everything from traditional cooking to small business development. Grandma Ruth's vision of creating gathering places where people could reconnect had become reality in ways she never could have imagined. Claire, Sarah Martinez, my business partner, approached with a tablet. The reporter from the Times is here early, and there's a line around the block for the memorial service. Through the front windows, I could see exactly what she meant. Hundreds of people filled the sidewalk, many carrying flowers or handwritten notes. Regular customers mixed with neighborhood advocates, food bloggers, and city officials who'd come to pay their respects to a man they'd never met, but whose impact they'd witnessed. The memorial service was scheduled for 2 o'clock, but we'd been serving coffee and sharing Harold stories since dawn. Mrs. Patterson, now 86, had appointed herself unofficial greeter. He believed that serving people coffee was really about serving their souls, she told a young reporter. Claire learned that from him, and now she's teaching it to everyone else. Detective Morrison, despite being officially retired, had organized security. Not that we need much security, he told me earlier. This crowd will police itself. They love what you've built here. At noon, an unexpected visitor appeared. James Caldwell, looking older and considerably humbler than he had during our last confrontation. He approached the counter hesitantly. "Miss Morrison," he said, "I hope it's appropriate for me to be here." "Mr. Caldwell," I replied, genuinely surprised. "What brings you to our memorial service?" "I wanted to apologize publicly, if you'll allow it." He gestured toward the crowded cafe. 5 years ago, I tried to destroy what your grandfather built because I couldn't understand its value. I learned a lot since then about what actually matters in life. What changed your mind? My daughter. His smile was rueful. She's 16 now, and when she learned about what I tried to do here, she was horrified. She made me read every article about Golden Mornings. Watch every interview you've given. She said she was ashamed to have a father who tried to tear down something beautiful just to make money. I studied his face. All I saw was genuine regret. She was right to be ashamed, he continued. What you've built here, what your grandfather envisioned. This is what cities need. Places where community happens naturally, where people matter more than profit margins. I spent my career destroying places like this, and I never understood what I was taking away from people. What are you doing now? Working with a nonprofit that helps small businesses navigate development pressures, trying to make amends for some of the damage I've done. He paused. We've helped 12 family businesses stay in their neighborhoods this year. It's not much, but it's a start. That's actually quite a lot. I said, meaning it. Miss Morrison, would it be possible for me to say something during the memorial? I know I don't deserve the platform, but I think people should hear that even someone like me can learn to see clearly. At 2 o'clock, we moved the service outside. I prepared remarks, but as I looked out at the sea of faces, customers who'd become friends, neighbors who'd become advocates, strangers who'd become believers, I set aside my notes and spoke from the heart. Harold Morrison believed that serving coffee was about serving souls. I began. He taught me that every interaction is an opportunity to make someone feel valued. Every customer is a chance to build community, and every day is a gift to create something beautiful. I told stories about his wisdom, his stubbornness, his unwavering belief that people deserve dignity. I talked about how he'd fought for his right to live on his own terms, and how that fight had given me the courage to live on mine. But Harold's greatest gift wasn't the money he left me, I said, looking directly at Bradley and my parents, who'd driven in from Long Island. It was the example he set of choosing love over fear, community over profit, and principles over convenience. When James Caldwell took the microphone, a murmur went through the crowd. I'm probably the last person who should be speaking at Harold Morrison's memorial, he began. 5 years ago, I tried to destroy everything he'd built because I couldn't understand its value. I saw property where he saw home. I saw profit potential where he saw community. He spoke honestly about his attempts to pressure me into selling, about the bureaucratic harassment his company had orchestrated, about the arrogance that had made him believe money could solve every problem and buy every dream. Harold Morrison and his granddaughter taught me that some things aren't for sale, he concluded. Not because they don't have value, but because their value can't be measured in dollars. They taught me that the most important question isn't what can I take, but what can I give? I'll spend the rest of my life try to live up to that lesson. The service continued with music from a local jazz quartet. Customers shared their own Harold stories. As the afternoon wound down, I found myself standing with Bradley in the spot where Grandpa Harold used to sit. He would have loved this, Bradley said, gesturing at the lingering groups of people. All these people whose lives he touched. He knew, I replied. That's why he fought so hard to protect it. Bradley had indeed changed. He'd rebuilt his career slowly, focusing on legal aid work. He'd remarried a teacher named Maria who valued kindness over status. And they just had their first child, a daughter named Ruth. I have something for you, he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. I've been working on this for months. Inside was a legal document establishing the Harold Morrison Foundation for Family Business Preservation, funded by Bradley's own savings and designed to help other families facing the kind of pressures we'd experienced. I can't undo the mistakes I made, he said, but maybe I can help other families avoid making the same ones. That evening, after the last customer had left, I sat alone in the original Golden Mornings with a cup of coffee brewed exactly the way Grandpa Harold had taught me. The walls were covered with photos from 5 years of community events. My phone buzzed with messages. A text from Mrs. Patterson. Harold would be so proud. An email from the Times reporter. Beautiful service. Story will run Sunday. A voice message from Maria. Thank you for helping Bradley become the man he was meant to be. But the message that moved me most was from a customer I barely knew, a young woman who'd been coming in for about 6 months. Thank you for showing me what community looks like. I moved to New York feeling completely alone, but Golden Mornings taught me that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up for you when you need them. That was Grandpa Harold's real legacy, I realized. Not the money or the property or the business success, but the understanding that we're all responsible for taking care of each other, that every day we choose whether to build bridges or walls, whether to include or exclude, whether to lift people up or tear them down. I pulled out my phone and opened the Instagram account that now had over 2 million followers around the world. Today we honored Harold Morrison, I typed, but every day we honor his memory by treating each other with dignity, by creating spaces where everyone belongs, and by proving that the most important things in life really aren't for sale. The post would get thousands of responses, as they always did. People sharing their own stories of loss and growth. Families reconciling after years of conflict. Small business owners finding courage to stand up to corporate pressure. But tonight, in the quiet cafe where it all began, I simply sat with my coffee and felt grateful. Grateful for grandparents who'd shown me what love looked like in action. Grateful for customers who become family. Grateful for the chance to spend my life doing work that mattered. And grateful for the painful lesson that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is losing the family you thought you had, so you can build the family you actually need. Outside, New York City hummed with its restless energy. Inside golden mornings, all was peaceful. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that kindness and community could thrive even in the most competitive places. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, surrounded by the legacy of love that Harold and Ruth Morrison had built, and that I'd been privileged to carry forward. What do you think? Has there ever been a moment in your life where you had to redefine what family truly means? Share your story in the comments below.